19, if you're not already there. 4 different gospel accounts, 4 different perspectives of the crucifixion of Jesus. Matthew's account, more detailed, more of the crowd's response to him being up there and the priest and the leaders of Israel tossing their insults at him. John's is more simplistic. John has a little bit different emphasis when he tells it. And so I'm not going to try to roll all 4 accounts together. We've mentioned other accounts as we went through the book of John at times for details. But notice we've also tried to let John stand alone most of the time. In other words, there's a reason God had 4 Gospels written. And there's a reason why John was written the way it was written. When we left last week, Pilate had folded. The spineless one had washed his hands of the matter. He had given over the man that he's declared innocent twice. The man that Herod has declared, I find no fault in him either. But Pilate is trying to A, save his job, B, as we noticed last week, placate them while at the same time not take credit for killing one that might be God. And so he basically does so by really doing nothing. Just hands him over. And so picking up tonight in verse 17, it says, Jesus went out from there carrying his cross. That does not negate the fact that Simon of Cyrene is pressed into service to help him. Think about, especially from the garden up to this point, the emphasis that John has put on Jesus being in command of the situation. That when they came to arrest him, he initiated the conversation. He went out to meet them and ask them who they're looking for. How that when they took him away to stand trial, that he was in command. That they didn't take him kicking and screaming. That he was dignified. That he was in control. He was the one who was dictating how this was going to play out. That's what John's perspective is here. He is not beaten into submission. He's not kicking and screaming. He's not being dragged to Golgotha against his will. He is in command. He is choosing this path. It says he's bearing his cross. That refers to the horizontal beam that would be attached to the vertical that was in the ground. And through history we find that there were several already placed permanently right outside of Jerusalem where Rome carried out their executions. And so he would take the crossbeam and he would generally in Roman law, he would be stripped and it would be laid on his back and he would have to drag it with the other end bouncing on the road down out of Jerusalem and then up the hill. And he would take it to the vertical beam and plant it in the ground that had either a notch yay far or so from the top of the beam that it would fit into, pulled up by ropes, or it could be pulled all the way to the top and set on the top. There were different style crosses. There was a T style, there was a plus or a cross style, and then there was an X style. Most likely, because of the sign being placed above his head, he's hung on a an X plus size cross where there's a notch. And they would nail him to the beam and then pull him up, suspended by nothing but his arms or his hands, and then push his feet up and nail him on that vertical. Calvary. That was the Latin. Place of the skull is the interpretation of the word Calvary. Hebrew, Golgotha. There are two different interpretations for the name. Some say that it's because the hill looked like a skull from a distance, that it had some caves in it and some impressions that made it look like a face. Others say that it's because there were skulls laying around on the ground from previous crucifixions. The Romans loved to... the Jews didn't allow it when it was one of their own, but if it was a foreigner, they didn't get involved. The Romans loved to simply leave the body on the cross till it fell completely apart, and the bones just kind of collected down at the base so they could make a statement. Regardless why it's called that, what a horrible name. To see the Son of God murdered on a hill called the place of a skull. It says there they crucified him. John keeps it short. John doesn't go into a lot of detail. We could go to history, we can go to the other accounts, we can pile all of it together and we can talk about the excruciating death that crucifixion is. We can talk about the blood loss and the delirium and the dehydration and ultimately the asphyxiation. That's not John's emphasis. And so we'll leave that for another time, similar to last week in the scourging. It's a study in and of itself, and it'll tear your heart out. But John's going somewhere else. John tells us there's two other men crucified with him, one on each side. Criminals, thieves. Rome's going to get their money's worth. We hired crucifixionists for today. We'll get 3 of them in. And so they're crucifying Jesus, and one on each side. And that's where, in Matthew 27, the mocking begins. Another study in and of itself. The humiliation that we talked about last week, the shame. One of these thieves changes direction in Luke 23 and realizes that he's been condemned and he needs to do something about that condition, and cries out to Jesus. For today, mainly just notice that Jesus takes the time for him. You're being crucified. You have been scourged. You are in the process of dying. How do you have a heart that's big enough to have time for somebody else? To offer some comfort. The beauty of Jesus. Verses 19 through 21 tells us of the inscription. Here's the thing about Pilate. He has a backbone when it serves him. He's no longer worried about a revolt in the city of Jerusalem. He's got all of this crowd that was crowded around his judgment seat outside the gate now. And he has pacified them by telling them they can crucify Jesus. And so he's going to get his last barb in. He is going to get his last say in. and it is the crime that the man has committed. It was generally hung on a placard around his neck while he carried his cross, and he would walk through town, and there would be heralds beside him who would cry out what he was guilty of. In this case, it's high treason. The King of the Jews. It was Pilate's choice how he worded it. He chose those words to get in one last barb at the Jewish leaders. This is your king. I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge that he claimed to be a king and that he's your king, and now I am putting him to death. And the Jews are reading it, and the chief priests, please don't put that. How about we just put that he claimed to be the king of the Jews, because we're not acknowledging that he's our king. And Pilate says, you know what? I've said what I've said. I'm going to stand my ground this time. I'm going to embarrass you. It's written in Hebrew and Latin and Greek. The only other possible language to put it in that area would have been Aramaic. Pilate has covered his bases. Everybody that passes by can read this sign. The Jews in their normal language. Those who've come from Rome, the Latin. And then Greek, the universal language in which everyone did business all over the world. So again, a dig at the Jews. I'm going to make sure that everybody that passes by this cross knows that's your king and that I've killed him. He is intentionally embarrassing them. Verses 23 and 24, John, even though Matthew is more of the prophecy writer in emphasizing it for the Jews, John doesn't let it get by. The soldiers, therefore, when they had crucified Jesus, took his outer garments and made 4 parts, a part to every soldier. A crucifixion squad was normally 4 of the best. And they would handle all of the crucifixions for that day. And they would stand guard until they were all completely finished. They'd been pronounced dead. And either in the case of the Jews, they had allowed them to take the body, or the others, they had allowed the vultures to land and begin to desecrate those bodies. So part of their payment, and it becomes written into Roman law not long after this date, that part of their payment would be the clothes and the personal effects of the condemned. And so they make 4 piles, one for each one, but there is this singular garment, this tunic, that is one piece. And it doesn't fit into the 4 piles. And so they begin to gamble. Jesus is hanging on the cross. He's dying. His mother and these other ladies are standing around, the friends that have braved the situation. And they use it as an opportunity to gamble. They're professional killers. They don't care. They're not bothered by the screams of pain that may be coming from the others that have been crucified. They're not bothered by the sobs that are probably coming from the women. They're just interested in gambling. So they split what was splittable, and they've tossed the dice for the tunic. In fulfillment of prophecy, that messianic psalm, Psalm 22, they divided my garments. They gambled over them. One more time, we see God's ability to predict years in advance through the pen of David the details of the moment. And remember, the Romans that are gambling they have no desire to fulfill Jewish prophecy. They're not doing it so they can fulfill prophecy. John's pointing it out that inadvertently. They are backing up God's plan. Then verse 25, while heartless executioners gamble, there's his mother. And I go back to the thought that I had when Sam did his devotional about Mary taking the Lord's Supper. This is the image she sees. No parent wants to watch a child suffer in any way. Our child falls off a bike and skins his or her knee, and it hurts us just as much. And there's her son. By the way, crosses were not, we get this image that he's 15, 20, 30 feet up in the air. The tallest of them were about 10 feet at the top, and then it dropped down and the bar was in it. His feet are below head height. They can see into his face. They can feel the agony. And Mary is surrounded by other ladies who had supported his ministry. Think about who has traveled to the cross. There's no mention of the Peter who's whipping out swords in the garden. There's no mention of Matthew, the tax collector, or Judas the zealot, who's this religious fanatic. His comforters are the ladies. Who is it that always stays up latest at night when the kids are sick? Who is it that cries the hardest when they're hurt? It's a heartbreaking scene to see Mary standing there watching. But Jesus takes note of her. He's the eldest son. Sometimes we speculate that Joseph's no longer in the picture, that he has died. Here is the most notable proof of that. Because there's no reason for Jesus to turn her care over to John if Joseph is still the provider in the home. Jesus has been the provider in the home. And since she has bought into his ministry, the provision for her has come on the road as they were traveling through Galilee with him. In fact, when you read the resurrection account, it says those ladies that had traveled with him and come out of Galilee were the ones that got up and went to the tomb on Sunday morning. That's these ladies. So her provision has been on the road, and now it's hanging on the cross. So he addresses her and provides for her future. Now go all the way back to when we started in 2025 and we were at a wedding feast and he addressed her as woman. And I told you, don't take that the way we use that word. Hey woman, get in your place, or hey woman, this or that. It was a term of the ultimate respect. Dear woman, dear lady, the lady of my life, behold your son. John, behold your mother. He has bestowed the utmost respect on his mother and then on his closest friend, that he would put his mother in her care. And you can make a note here, Acts 1 and verse 14. At least through Pentecost, Mary does not leave Jerusalem. John and them have been what? Before this all ends, they're going to be what? They're going to be commanded to stay in Jerusalem until the Spirit comes. That's where John's providing for her. And in Acts 1 and verse 14, she's still there. Where they go after that, we're not told. But he has taken her into his home. After these things, after what? After all of these prophecies have been fulfilled. After everything that He has said is going to take place has taken place. After everything God has said is going to take place has taken place. After the duty of a son is fulfilled to his mother, after everything that has needed to happen to get to this moment, John tells us suddenly the humanity comes out of him. I'm thirsty. Can you blame him? He's exhausted. He's dehydrated. He's low of blood. And so at that moment, he just wants some human kindness. Just let me have a drink. And then the second half of verse 30, and this is John's emphasis all the way through it. It's why there's no details about crucifixion itself. That's why there's very little interaction with those that are going on around. And we don't get the crowd's response to him. It very simply says that Jesus said, "It is finished." You might write in the margin, "It is accomplished." It is complete. What's finished? Well, all the prophecy that needed to be fulfilled up until this point is finished. The time is finished. We've already mentioned this through John. Think about the times that he said, "It's not my time yet, it's not my time yet, it's not my time yet." And then when he looks at him and says, "You know what, now it's time," that's finished. This stage of the plan is finished. The Passover lamb is dying. The blood is being shed that will forgive for the rest of time those who were washed by it. His part is finished. Think about that. When He dies and they put Him in the tomb, the next step's up to the Father. The resurrections, His part in this plan on this earthly side of it, in this physical form, this Word became flesh. John chapter 1 in verse 14 has now come full circle. His part in that plan is done as far as salvation. Now He's going to come out on the other side. He has things to say to them. He's going to ascend back to the Father. By the way, the Father's going to resurrect it, and the Father's going to allow Him to ascend. The Father's going to restore Him to His right hand. His part in it's done. And so as He is dying, as He bows His head and gives up His spirit, He goes back to that statement in John chapter 17, "I have accomplished everything you sent me to accomplish." And I said when we studied it that He could say that because in His mind it was complete. Because He was going through it, that there was no way out of it. He's now going back and stamping that. I've accomplished everything you asked me to accomplish. Father, my part of this is done. Now glorify me. Going back and rolling John 17 in together with it. Like Paul in 2 Timothy, his reward is waiting at this moment. Finished the course, kept the faith. He's done what he was supposed to do to please the Father and to fulfill the plan. There's your Jesus trait. And it's the key to the book of John. As we finish this out in the next few weeks, John's going to tell us exactly why he wrote a gospel. "These things I have written that you may believe that guy, my friend, the one who loved me, He's the Christ. He's the one." The trait that allows him to say that comes from "It is finished. It is accomplished. I follow through, Father, to the end." That has to be our trait. We must adopt the attitude that says, "Father, it does not matter what road you ask me to walk. It does not matter how dark it gets. It does not matter if it humiliates me at times. It doesn't matter if it hurts. It doesn't matter if it's always what I want. I accomplish what you send me to accomplish. I do what you tell me to do. I finish what I'm sent to finish. When we do that, like Jesus, we can bow our head and commit our spirit to the Father. When we do that, like Paul, we can say, it's done. I've run the race. I have busted through the tape and I'm standing on the other side victorious. And the crown's coming. Have you accepted the mission? Are you running through to the end? And when it's time to bow your head and leave this life, will you be able to say, it's accomplished? As we stand and sing.